Welcome, welcome, one and all, to JWC Livestream. This is Poetic Deep Dive. We bring some poetry to you on Mondays, or some sort of language play, or voice fulfillment. In this particular case, we've been going over Victorian poesy. And I have been writing again, writing poetry. Poesy is the old antiquarian word for the writing and the love of writing poetry, like how it's put together. And that meant something very different 100, 200 years ago than it does today. Poetry is not held in the same regard. I suppose it's one of those, gee, I wonder why things, but poetry is meant to be contemplated. It's meant to be profound. If consciousness is the surface of water, poetry is a rock or a meteorite, something that perturbs the surface. It should change how you think, even if it's just briefly. It should cause you to think differently or to refocus your thinking. Some people say, well, that's making it too complicated, and that would, by saying that, you're being reductive, which I don't find that helps the poetic spirit very much, or any transcendent operation. And we're all about the transcendence here on JWC Livestream. I have been writing poetry again. Very angsty, perhaps filled with dark energy, as some have said, some who have read it. I wrote some a couple months ago, which I'm going to be reading those two short ones, because I have to pass the new stuff through some filters, because some might say that it's ferocious. But the images are there. I wrote one about the catacombs under Paris. It's a spooky one, because my poems tend to be either angsty or spooky or something. Especially now that I've come full circle. As I've stated on the previous two episodes of Poetic Deep Dive, I had stopped writing poetry for a while, to the point of where it was never happening. Like, I could set it up, I could try to write it, and I could even write a poem, but wasn't satisfying, and it didn't feel like the old stuff. I've been writing poesy forever, and it helped shape my voice for my prose, my fiction. Set me up. It's been an indomitable force, a source of episodic satisfaction, and I couldn't just leave it by the wayside. So I was inspired by JWC's resident poet to pick up my quill once more and start pursuing the poetic muse. And I thought that a righteous pursuit. And now I'm writing poetry. Say what you will about the poetry. It may not be, my ballroom days may be over poetically. I don't know. We'll see. Some of them I like, some of them, you know. It's the ones that feel alive. When you're writing poetry, it has to be vital. It has to be a living thing. It has to stir you, as in one of the ways that I previously mentioned at the beginning of the show. So I've been writing poetry. I've been editing this book I just finished called Chiron 6. I'm like 10 chapters into the edit of that. Third of the way done. It's going well. The 0 to 1 draft process is not so hideous an effort, thankfully. There's that method of the 0 to 1 draft. People talk about, well, this is my first draft. It is, but the 0 draft, the true 0 draft, is the first thing that happens, that comes on, that is written on the paper. The first thing that shows up in the typeset is the 0 draft. And then you spell check it, you do stuff like that. But then there's the process of reading it to someone or allowing someone to read it. Never underestimate the importance of that. You could have all the private literature you want. You could write for yourself and just you and God or transcendence or whoever it is you're writing for, your Aunt Betty, whoever it is. But it gets to the next level when you share it with someone, when you read it to a writer's group, or you allow someone to read it for the purposes of seeing how they react. You got to grow some thick skin. You got to strengthen yourself against criticism, especially brutal, non-inspirational criticism. The first thing someone wants to do is, kick your head off your shoulders with some kind of hot take about what's wrong with it. You got to just keep pressing. I mean, for the love of creativity, you have to keep pressing on. It doesn't matter. And the love of it will help you grow and will give you the strength to push past heartless criticism, thoughtless criticism, but any non-inspirational criticism. Like if someone's not giving you, well, this made me think of this, or I wrote one like this, or I would, if I had written it, I would have did this, because that type of criticism that's not unwelcome. It doesn't matter, like, if you don't like it, if you don't take it well. It's important to hear someone talk about your stuff like that. It helps push you forward, take you to the next level. And we're all about the next level here at JWC. We're all about writing differently. It's your job to write better by doing it more, by reading better. But it's our job to help you write differently, to take you to that other place inspirationally. So we are in the thick of this episode. And it's time to turn to Victorian poesy. This is a Victorian poesy, Penhaligon's scented treasury of verse and prose. And it is scented. These pages are perfumed. And there's so many poems about flowers and about beautiful environments and airy places that it stands to reason that it would be. It complements it. So, and speaking of which, this first one is called The Song of the Chrysanthemum. Pardon me. At last I have come to my throne, no more despised and unknown. In gardens forlorn, my blossoms are born. No more in some corner obscure do I drearily, sadly endure the withering blight of neglect and of slight. Oh, long have I waited and late for this fair and slow coming fate, which the years have foretold as they sighingly rolled. Oh, long have I waited and lone, but at last on my blossomy throne, the world doth declare I am fairest of fair and queen of the autumn I reign. With a sway that none may disdain, I once who did stand despised in the land. That's by Nora Perry. The Song of the Chrysanthemum. So, I mean, you have something very, very beautiful there. At last I've come to my throne. It's the acknowledgement of temporality right up front. Temporality is beginning, middle, and end. It is spring, summer, autumn, and winter. It is the turning of the wheel, the turning of the seasons. We need to feel that in order to be oriented. And then the next step is the cultural undertow, dealing with gardens forlorn and blossoms born, withered and blight, neglect and slight. She's waited. She's waited. She's the queen of autumn. And who doesn't know what it's like to be unfulfilled and waiting? It feels like everything takes forever. The anti-materialist protocol comes with the queen of the autumn and queen of the autumn I reign, with a sway that none may disdain. So there's something sublimated about the queen of autumn. She transcends, you see. And that is the creative part. The typeset's very nice. It's a scattered, I feel like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 verses, 4 lines for each verse, too long and too short, precisely in that order. And the muse is just taking this whole concept of flowers, universal imagery of flowers and seasons, and there's a personification, there's a queendom of autumn, which is a beautiful thing to contemplate. And there's that contemplation again when it comes to poems. You know, you don't have to rhyme, you don't have to be formalist in any way, you don't have to emphasize the form, but they did it, and by doing so, they made it alive. And I think that's a challenge. Alive, what do you mean by alive? Well, it's vital. The way you felt it when it was read, the way it took you somewhere. That's vital. This is old, and yet it still lives. You know, there's a beauty that's conveyed. Quite nice. So the next thing we're going to go to, again, that was the Song of the Chrysanthemum. And we have another one out of the same book. We're probably going to take this book till the end of January. I have plenty of stuff that I want to read out of. I might get to some Bukowski. I have A Flash of Lightning Behind the Mountains, and I have Love is a Dog from Hell, and I'm considering reading some of those because Hank's got some power. But, you know, we'll see. I'm still figuring that out. This next one from the same book of Victorian Poesy, this is called Outside. King Winter sat in his hall one day. He said to himself, said he, I must admit, I've had some fun. I've chilled the earth and cooled the sun. And not a flower or tree, but wishes that my reign were done. And as long as time and tide shall run, I'll go on making everyone as cold can be. There came a knock on the outer door. Who's there? King Winter cried. Open your palace gate, said Spring, for you can reign no more as king. No longer here abide. This message from the sun I bring. The trees are green, the birds do sing. The hills with joy are echoing. So pray, sir, step outside. And that's by Hugh Chesterman, 19th century poet. And that was called Outside. So you see what's happened here. we have two personifications of the season. There was a queen of autumn, and now there's a king of winter. And he seems a tyrant. He seems to enjoy his throne too well. And if you think about all of that and what that implies, they're taking the attributes of autumn and the attributes of winter, and they're giving them a human aspect. And in that way, they've made it timeless and transcendent. Imagine if there were people who possessed the actual powers of the seasons, you know, the way it was in the ancient verse when it came to Persephone and Hades and Demeter, and how she was upset by the abduction of her daughter and how the world suffered for it. I like that concept because it spiritualizes the seasons. It turns them into stations or acts in a play. People just act like these things are, well, it's because the planet does. Yeah, that's nice. But I'm an etherealist. I like to spiritualize life, as should most poets, talking about the soul of a thing, the spirit of a thing, painting it in its vivid, timeless colors so that we can see it pop out. It's a big deal. It's important. And these poems do that. So do that. Write a poem like that. Make the queen of the internet or the king of social media, or vice versa. Write a poem like that. Do what the Victorian poets did. That's something worth exploring. Take some powerful wheel that spins over your life and give it a persona, give it a title. It'll transform the whole thing. Never say that there's nothing to write poetry about. Even if you feel uninspired or disenchanted, read more poetry. That's part of what I did. So here we go. These are two little ones that I wrote. I'm a little iffy about them, but part of writing poetry is reading poetry out loud so people will hear it. And that's what the show's for, paying special attention to such. So this is called Personal Flux. I wrote this sometime last year, I would imagine between summer and autumn. Personal Flux by me, Richard Andrew Olkus. There are moments that you would give back or take up anew. There are nows that you would want to revisit forever. A photo will take you back to a flowery embrace, memories which will intrude and needs be driven back. Each comes to repersonalize the what if of personal flux. Yeah, so that one's a little better than I thought. Tiny, real short. I was writing shorties. You get in the limber, stretching out, testing the waters of poetry after having not written anything. So what Personal Flux talks about is the moment. There are some nows that never end. People say, well, focus on now. And then they'll say, well, that's not now, that's the past. Yes, but there are certain past nows that seem to burn in place, and they come back like a boomerang. They come back like any faithful planet to some position in the sky that they've been in before, the sky of recollection. And there's no one to say that you can't think about those things every once in a while. Some of these things are unwanted and intrusive, just the way it says. But that last part where it says each comes to repersonalize the what if of personal flux, those are those unwanted nows, or perhaps something that's so delightful but wasn't meant to be. So that's personal flux, you see. Try to do one of those yourself. sometime this week. Write a poem along those lines. Find something timeless that embeds itself in the now. This next one's called Psychic Glamour, also by me. She strode through a marbled foyer to the mirrored escalator. A scent of chlorinated water textured the misty ambience. Beauty wanders in and out of mind as her psychic glamour blossoms. Heads turn to perceive the unseeable, the lioness ascending to mount. None can deny her as she maxes out her hormones, credit cards, civilized wonderment. So that is the psychic glamour. Some person who has charisma or wields their beauty, be it male, be it female, be it otherwise, they have a psychic glamour, something that sticks in your mind, you know? If it's fashion, if it's style, if it's costumage, whatever it is, it causes us to pause. And it echoes the personal flux, which is probably why I grouped it together. Because the psychic glamour might be something that causes the now, the personal flux. There are nows that you would want to revisit forever, if we hearken back to that other poem. This poem explains one of those, I think. The psychic glamour does, the second poem. It explains what I mean by that. Because there have been people who have been so beautiful or so noble or so ravaged and broken that they come from out of nowhere, even sometimes years later, to remind you that I was in that now, where I saw that person, that place, that thing. In this case, we're flowing into the life, the vitality. So it's a person. And that harkens back to the Victorian poesy that we read concerning the personification of the seasons, the Queen of Autumn, the King of Winter, etc. So remember to do that as an exercise. When you write in that way, view someone you know dressed in a costume. Imagine them being that particular entity, or perhaps it's a person in a dream or an actor from a movie. Whatever it takes, just describe them in that place, that entitled place that you've elevated them to. And when you do that, you could write a poem about anyone. King of the sun, the queen of the moon, you know, the lady of all owls, whatever it is, a fairy, a nixie, confer it, transfer it, impose it, write some poesy. Anyway, that's how this show goes. Time flies when you're having fun, because human beings are time machines. Chronology is static, but time is relative, and it's relative to your heartbeats. If you're doing what you love, if you're following your bliss, if you're expressing your passion, time flies very quickly. If you're at the DMV or you're filling out your tax return, not so much. Time seems to drag and claw and become more dense and heavy. That's just part of the cosmos. We're locked in here, my friends. Poetry makes it easier. Poetry makes it lighter. This has been JWC Livestream. We call this Poetic Deep Dive. Leave some comments. Let us know what you think. Post some poems. That would be great. Head over to joeswritersclub.com. Check out our author bio pages, our blogs. Head over to joeswriters.club and sign up. Join Joe's Writers Club. More members we have, the more people drawing water and bringing to the table, the more we can help you. We're trying to have a writers community, a growing writers community. And you can be a part of that. If you like what you hear on the show, I am going to be chronicling my journey back to being a poet. And we'll see how long that takes before I write something that's worthy. I wrote a few already, but not so sure. They need reading, so I'll probably eventually read them on here, but I'm reading a few, like I said, a few I wrote last year, but this year's got a different spirit to it. So head over to our Facebook, our Twitter, go to our YouTube channel and like and subscribe. We need you. We need your membership. And thank you so much for listening and watching. Do yourself a favor and pick up some poetry and read it and write some poetry. Go to a park, sit on your deck in a shelter, watch the rain fall, listen to the wind. I mean, it's cold out now, but there's plenty of places that you could go to sketch. There's plenty of ways you could write some stuff down and use it to navigate through these troubling times. Embrace transcendence. It's good for you. And you, thanks a lot. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Stay creative, people. Yeah, I don't know why. The laptop is